to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is the Bowery of the Casual Cinecast, Mike. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. And now my watch has ended, Chris.
Oh, okay. We went from one reference to another.
Yep.
Good job.
I switched it up on you.
Yeah. All right. Well, the concierge of the Continental Casual Cinecast Hotel is Justin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to receive the concierge title because usually I feel like I get the shaft on these introductions.
Figured to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah.
I hope you feel special.
Yeah, because you didn't throw him on his feet with another reference from something completely different.
Yeah.
If this is your first time joining us, we like to start off every episode in a section called What's on Our Minds, which is usually the media that we've been watching or reading, but we've changed that. So now this section is called News on the March, where we talk about all the relevant film news that we find interesting, as well as maybe some of the stuff that we've been watching over the last week. After that, we will be moving into our feature review, and that will be a review for John Wick, Chapter 3, Parabellum. And then after the review, we have a report from one of our friends, Peyton Paulette, who is actually at the Cannes Film Festival right now, who is sending us a live update of all the cool stuff that he's been watching and doing and seeing, and we are going to talk about it and be jealous about it.
Yeah. It's basically going to be 2 minutes of us being like, man, I wish I was there doing that. That sounds cool.
All right.
Yeah. So stay tuned after the review if you want to hear us be jealous of Peyton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also stay tuned to this feed because each month we review a film from the Criterion Collection, which is voted on by you, the listeners. So go check out our latest episode on Safety Last and look for our new episode on Stalker.
Yeah, that'll be out later this week or to the end of the week or maybe very, very early next week, but very, very soon.
Or maybe by the time you're listening to this very episode.
Yeah, so make sure you stay tuned and stalk our feed.
Ooh, good one.
Right. Thanks for the transition. If you want to stalk our feed, you can do so on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. On there, you can send us questions about the movies we're watching. You can vote in our polls, like to choose our next Criterion film. And then, of course, if you want to send us questions directly, you can do that at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And then, of course, as always, if you like the show and you haven't done so yet, go onto iTunes, give us a 5-star review. Let us know what you think of the show. That will help people who haven't heard of us hear of us, which
That's right.
That would make us happy if more people heard about us.
It would.
No shame in that.
Yeah, if we're all being upfront about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And speaking of having no shame, I did want to remind you guys, if you've forgotten or if you're a new listener and you haven't listened to the show for very long, then I have a film that I made on Amazon Prime. It is called Camino. It is a dark comedy. It is an indie film, very, very indie. And I just wanted to let you guys know that we are almost at 50 reviews, and I've heard from the people who do distribution and stuff that you really need your film to get to 50 reviews on Amazon, and we are at 48. So I would love it if you guys would go on to Amazon, watch the film. Again, it's called Camino. Leave us a review. Be honest, it doesn't really matter if it's 5 or 1 stars. I would like you to give me a 5-star. I think that would be very nice. But,
yeah.
You know, a review's a review at this point. So
50 mixed reviews is better than 49 positive.
Yes, that is
According
my
to
understanding.
Justin's logic he's laying down right now.
Yeah. But yeah, it helps support indie films, support small films and stuff. And yeah, also if you do go watch it, let us know what you think. Shoot us a message, shoot us an email at the aforementioned at casualcinecast or casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
And
yeah,
if the
also, just so you guys know, sorry, Chris,
That's all right.
I just wanted to say that in the notes, I find this humorous. It says, Little Camino butt plug.
Oh, did I write that unintentionally?
I don't know, but it's funny.
Because
it's a plug for Camino. But you threw the word butt in there, someone, to make it a joke.
I may have done that. I was trying to throw Justin off a bit.
Oh, well, it didn't work.
Damn it.
It actually just gave me merch ideas for the movie.
And
you should
what I would
just
do,
retitle the movie. Is it too late?
I think so. I don't know what the rules are, but we might get some weird people watching the movie.
I assure you, you would have more than 50 reviews.
Yeah.
If that was the name of your movie.
That's a good idea. We actually, John and I, the writer, were talking yesterday, and we talked about naming our next movie like Scarlett Johansson naked, so that we could get like a lot of hits and stuff.
Yeah, good idea.
Smart.
Yeah, we'll see.
Probably a lot of disappointed 1-star reviews, though, unless you can actually...
There's still reviews, though, right?
Manage to make the movie about that.
That's right. That's very true. But yeah, speaking of searching, the film is called Camino. It's the first one that pops up. There's a bunch of films called Camino, or with Camino in the title, so it's kind of hard to find, but the artwork's blue. It's pretty much the first one. It has the most reviews of any movie called Camino, so you can find it pretty easily.
Humble brag. And with that, are we ready to move into News on the March?
Yes, please.
Do it.
News on the March!
All right, guys. So lots of things happening this week. Stuff that we need to talk about because this is News on the March, after all.
That's what I hear.
One thing that dropped today that I think is the most interesting of all the things, and that is the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood trailer. This is the second trailer for Quentin Tarantino's 9th film that is premiering at the Cannes Film Festival today.
Yeah, it's already gotten some reviews back.
Yeah, by the time you're hearing this, it will have premiered and been reviewed by many, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of mostly positive, with a few people kind of being like, what's the point of it all? You know, but mostly positive.
That's good. I mean, you could say that after any movie, really.
That's true. Yeah.
That's
So-
too existential.
What did you guys think of the second trailer?
I thought it looks like a lot of fun, you know? I have been kind of worried about this one just because I haven't been too big on the last two Tarantino films. So
Right, and on that note, this seems like Tarantino at his most self-indulgent.
it does. But in like a fun way, I think.
Well,
Like-
I think if you were talking to him, he'd probably think all of his ways were fun ways.
I think so. Playful. Can I say playful? Is that a better term than fun?
Sure, I like it better.
Yeah, I mean, I guess based on this trailer, it gives me more hope considering that I wasn't too big on the last two films, right? Because it seems colorful and bright and like kind of goofy, kind of silly. And I like that. And I like the world that it's building. Like, it feels like it belongs in this world that he's making, like this 1969 Hollywood world.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I've heard rumors about what this movie's about, and up until the trailer, no one really knew how much of like the Manson family was involved. Like, I knew Margot Robbie was playing Sharon Tate, and I knew someone was cast as Charles Manson, and I knew somehow they were going to get wrapped up with the Manson family. But Tarantino himself has actually said that this is more about the year as a whole rather than the Manson family in general. Like, it's not a Manson family movie. So I'm really wondering... Well, I'm assuming, first of all, that this is going to be another one of his, like, American, or not even American, just, like, revisionist history movies, kind of like Django or Inglourious Bastards were, you know?
Yeah, that was actually the feeling maybe it's because he's killing Nazis, but I got an Inglourious Bastards vibe from this.
Well, yeah, there's the very obvious movie within a movie trailer where Leonardo DiCaprio is, like, shooting Nazis with a flamethrower, which looks pretty fun.
The line, too, is probably my favorite part of the whole trailer, and I think it says something along the lines of, did someone order fried sauerkraut? And
That's funny. Yeah, so I don't know. I think I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up with them, like, murdering the Manson family or something. Who knows with this movie, but I have a feeling it's going to be, like, a retelling of history in a more fun Tarantino-esque way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's where the Once Upon a Time could come from, other than like its reference to Once Upon a Time in the West or Once Upon a Time in America, you know, the Westerns. I think it could be sort of like fairy tale-ish.
Yeah, even Inglourious Bastards, Chapter 1 starts out with Once Upon a Time in Nazi-occupied France.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so it's a kind of a continuation of maybe that.
Yeah, that idea
theme.
of revisionist history.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah, I think DiCaprio and Brad Pitt look like they're having a lot of fun in this movie.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a lot of fun had with the movies within the movies, like the movies that Leonardo DiCaprio is starring in.
Yeah.
Those look really fun.
Yeah, there's some really great GIFs going around after this trailer dropped of really cool Leo DiCaprio shots.
Oh, yeah. Well, we need more Leo DiCaprio gifs. You know, the Gatsby toasting one is getting old, and the Wolf of Wall Street one where he like bites his finger is kind of old.
Yeah, I actually retweeted one today that was like my new favorite Leonardo DiCaprio gif is no longer the Great Gatsby wine toasting one. It's actually this new one from the trailer where he's like in front of like the logo of some talk show.
Yeah.
And he's like dancing with like
with that smarmy face.
Two backup dancers next to him, and he's making like the coolest face.
Yeah. I know the one you're talking about. That's great. That was in like the teaser trailer, that clip too.
Yeah. I retweeted it just because they're right. It is a pretty fantastic gif.
And did you guys see the posters that came out? They were like posters of the movies that Leonardo DiCaprio's character is in the movie.
Oh, I saw one of them and it was really cool.
Yeah, there's like 3 to 5 of them. I can't remember. It was just like a quick Reddit post I saw. But one of them is it's like a direct ripoff of Navajo Joe with Burt Reynolds, and it's called like Nebraska Jim or something like that.
Nice.
And it's got Leonardo DiCaprio on it, and it actually says it's directed by like Sergio Corbucci on the poster.
Oh, cool.
Which it's fun little reference.
Yeah, he directed some pretty famous spaghetti westerns.
Yeah, and I'm sure that all of these movies within a movie, they'll be chock full of references to like old film history. So I think like for people who are into film and older film, this is going to be super fun to watch, if for no other reason than those, I think.
Yeah. And you know, one thing I miss about whenever I was first starting to get into film, and Tarantino was one of the guys that got me into film, and just hearing him talk about how passionate he was and all the obscure movies that he used to love and reference was like infectious. You know, I loved it. And I remember you and I, back whenever, like before Blu-rays were even that big, you and I got on Amazon and ordered a whole bunch of like really cheap Italian, like DVDs and like Blue Anchor released stuff, you know? And we found some really cool spaghetti westerns and some really cool like gems in there. And it's been so long since I've actually like gotten into any, you know, movies like Keoma or Four of the Apocalypse or The Great Silence or anything like that. But
yeah,
when Tarantino comes up, it reminds me of how much I just want to go back and dive into like trashy genre movies, you know?
Right. There's something that happens, I think, like at least for me, is like if you get older and your time becomes more limited and those things get pushed back like in priority, and then something like this happens and you're like, oh, wait a minute, those are really fun, and maybe I should like make those a higher priority. But you know, this trailer I think did a pretty good job of not giving me a lot of plot to the point where I feel like I know exactly what to expect going in terms of main plot.
Yeah.
Like I could kind of tell, you know, it's about an actor who's feeling like he's coming to the end of his time, you know, that he's getting washed up. And that's about it, right? Everything else is just kind of fun clips. This is very much how I like my trailers.
Right.
You know, if not just like a teaser trailer, I like vagueness.
Yeah, that was actually my one big fear going into this second trailer, because I was already sold on it. And so there was no real need for me to watch this second one except for to talk about it with you guys. But after I got done, I was like, hey, I don't know that much more about the film. It just, you know, looks fun, you know, and so yeah, this is the way your trailers should be. Take note, Hollywood.
Yeah, I actually just did a quick Google on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood since it just had its premiere hours ago. And it's all just a lot of fun. Everyone's just saying that it is Quentin Tarantino's most fun in years.
So they can use fun, but I can't.
Yeah, I think you mean playful, Mike.
Oh, excuse me. It all bodes well. It seems
Totally.
like the most enthusiastic review. Like even when Inglourious Bastards premiered at Cannes, the reception was initially really mixed. And it wasn't until it got like a wide release in the States that the reviews shot up to like positive. So the fact that it's so positive right now is encouraging.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So moving on, guys, unless there's anything else anyone wanted to say about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Nope, not until the movie comes out.
Yep.
Okay, so guys, there is a show called Game of Thrones.
I've never heard of this show. Tell me about it.
Well, it's extremely popular. It premiered in 2011, and since then, the face of television has been completely different. And that show has come to an end this most recent Sunday.
Sad.
I know. Season 8, Episode 6. I'm sure, Justin, I know you don't watch this show. I know, Chris, you do, despite playing dumb earlier. Surely you have heard this show is ending.
Was that directed to me?
Yeah, surely you can't escape it, right? You've heard something, right?
Right, yeah, it's everywhere that I look. It's everywhere that I listen,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. You can't do anything without seeing a hot take on Game of Thrones.
That's true.
Yeah, so anyway, this is the final episode of the final season, and it seems like people are pretty mixed to negative on the whole.
That's been my experience.
Yeah. Which I think everyone called. Anyone who with a brain could have told you this was coming years ago. But maybe not to this extent. So, I don't know. Chris, what did you think of the finale of Game of Thrones? And let's keep it spoiler-free, so anyone listening who intends to watch the show, don't worry. You're good.
Yeah, I thought it was really good until the atomic bomb went off.
And
that was
old atomic bomb thing.
Chris, you should write every show so that the
I
entire
remember
show's going to end.
he said that a long time, and then I remember Lost season whatever happened, and then he could no longer use that joke for a while.
The atomic bomb actually went off.
Season 5.
There was actually an atomic bomb that could go off, and he was like, "Oh, I guess I can't use that as a joke for ridiculousness."
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
I liked it. It is different. The show is really like, all right, I was trying to think about how to talk about the show and how the show is become a different thing, right? It's like the show started off like a David Mamet play, or, where it's just people talking and trying to figure stuff out, right? And then in the later seasons, it's like
intrigue.
Intrigue. The later seasons, it becomes much more spectacle, much more Marvel. It's like David Mamet that eventually becomes, like at the end of a David Mamet play, it becomes a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. And it's these two very different things that don't necessarily mesh. I think I enjoyed both of them, but together, it's like this really weird thing. And I find the whole Game of Thrones experience very interesting as far as the adaptation and going past the books and all that stuff. I will say that I enjoyed it. What I really want to do is get past this immediate reaction, because a lot of this reminds me a lot of Lost. So I want to get past this immediate reaction where, not everybody hates it, and I want to watch it all again.
Yeah.
But from
I was just to say, there's literally a man at my job who is like higher up than me, and he came out of the office today, and he was like, "See you guys later," and we were like, "See ya," and he was like, he stopped, and he's like, "Did you guys watch Game of Thrones Sunday?" and everyone was like, "Yeah," and he's like, "God, only a fucking idiot would like that," and then stormed out of the room.
Well,
it's like that attitude isn't helping anybody.
Yeah. The presentation of your disappointment, if you have disappointment in this, has a lot to do with it, right? Like, you can be disappointed, and I can understand why you would be disappointed, because it's no longer a David Mamet play, right?
Well, it's the most popular show that's ever existed.
Well, and that's true, too. There was always going to be disappointment.
A lot of people are watching a very different show than the show that they were making, right? Yeah. Some people are watching an epic romance. Some people are watching, an epic fantasy hero comes out on top tale.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are watching a very different show than the show that was always intended, I think. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of a lot of the ending of Lost, where people were upset, and I think we've talked about this before, where Lost turned out to be more about the characters than about the mystery, and that disappointed them. And it's the same thing here in this. There are things that people have focused on for 8 years, if not longer, because they read the books, like certain prophecies and stuff like that, right? And trying to decipher them. Well, okay, that's kind of getting a spoiler. So if those prophecies don't turn out like you thought they were going to, or if they do, you might be disappointed, and because you've spent 8 years of your life trying to figure it out. And so it's only natural that type of thing happens, I think. But that's those are my thoughts. I liked it. I enjoyed every moment watching it. I think maybe the last two seasons are a little bit rockier, but I enjoyed the spectacle of it, right? But Mike, you are a much bigger fan of this, and you've, read a lot more of the books, and, I think that you're more into this than I am, and I would like to know what you think.
Sure. Yeah, so I actually just talked to a book reader friend of mine before recording this podcast, and he and I were actually talking about the end of Game of Thrones. And a lot of what I've gathered are people who are really upset with character motivation in this last couple episodes. A lot of people who watch the show feel like a lot of character motivation is out of left field. And anyone who has watched the show knows exactly what we're talking about. And anyone who doesn't, sorry. But how the ending goes down, I remember reading theories about this years ago, right? In broad strokes, not everything, but in broad strokes, a lot of this ending were things that had been in my brain as one of the many possibilities for years now.
Right.
And so when it happened, whereas a lot of people I think were shocked or appalled or felt it was out of nowhere, I felt, oh, finally this character makes sense to me. And I was right to be suspicious of them all along. But that's all I'll say there. I will say that I also liked it. I think that the worst thing they did was shorten the last 2 seasons. If they had just done 2 full 10-episode seasons, they could have fleshed out character motivations. They could have fleshed out a whole lot more stuff that would have made it feel a lot more
lived in
tone with the original seasons and the pacing that was set up in the first 4 years of the show.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that that's the biggest mistake of the last 2 seasons is shortening them, even though we probably got 8 hours of content this year.
Yeah, I mean, the seasons only come out to be, like, if you take up the runtime for seasons 7 and 8, they're less than 2 hours shorter than previous seasons.
But I think those 2 hours could have really, especially this season.
Especially this season.
You could have dealt with consequences of certain things and...
just conversations.
Yeah, had conversations. The best episode of this season was episode 2. And all that episode is people sitting around and talking. And it was great.
And these finales, the last 2 or 3 episodes were all an hour and 20 minutes. And they all could have been 1,000% better if they had all just been an hour and 30 minutes each and just add in dialogue.
Yeah.
Conversations between characters. It doesn't take much. The show is almost there for me. Like, it's almost great. As far as the story beats and how every character ends, I have no problems with them.
Right.
I wish they would have slowed their roll a little bit. Like, I get it. You can only do so many episodes because, you got to pay Lena Headey $1.5 million per episode. So I get that.
I also may be way off. My understanding is that HBO was like, we will let you do more episodes. We will give you more money.
There are certain things that I think are like talking points. I would be very surprised if HBO is willing to front a 10-episode season where each episode is multiple millions of dollars, on top of doing a Game of Thrones prequel, a Golden Compass adaptation, a Watchmen TV show.
So you don't think that that's...
I think that it may have been ultimately D&D's decision to shorten the show. But when you're paying the price tag that HBO is for all this, you're not going to argue too hard if they're like, yeah, 6 episodes sounds good for the last season.
That's possible, yeah.
But that's stuff that we'll never know. That's just speculation. There's a line in the finale of Game of Thrones that says, did I make the right decision? And another character says, I don't know. Ask me again in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much the legacy of Game of Thrones. I think people will look back on it a few years from now and realize there was a lot more leading up to an appropriate ending than they realize at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think that it being the most popular show ever, it is going to be regarded as the most popular failure ever. Like, it's going to take the place of Lost now as, like, wearer of the crown of, like, the TV show that shit the bed, Even though I don't think it's justified in that.
I don't think either one of those...
Maybe not. But especially Game of Thrones, because they ended early and went out with a certain ending point in mind, instead of going on too long and making up an ending point later.
Right.
I would rather a show do that any day than go on too long.
Agreed.
So Justin, as someone who has never watched Game of Thrones, do you have any thoughts on this conversation or the conversation around it in general? Are you more or less inclined to want to watch Game of Thrones now as someone who has never been a huge fan? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm the same amount of inclined to watch it. I'm not letting a lot of negative reaction to it or people saying that the finale is bad sway me, for reasons that you've mentioned, such as I love the finale of Lost and the way that it ended. And
I want to go ahead and support you and just say you always have.
I always have, from like the moment I watched it.
I've warmed up to it over the years as I've thought about it, but I was very much in the knee-jerk reaction of everyone who just dismissed it right away because it wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your support.
Yeah, you're welcome. I just want to let you know that, I'm not completely there, but I acknowledge that, maybe I was quick to react on that.
Right. But you're one of the people who came around on it. There's still a ton of people who call it a terrible thing, terrible ending, a terrible show.
And they always will.
And yeah, probably always will. And so like I've heard enough bad talk about when shows end to know that like what people say and what opinion gets shouted the loudest isn't necessarily what I should be listening to, because I also heard a lot about like a terrible ending with Sopranos, and that has like one of the best endings to a show of all time. So it doesn't change my inclination to watch the show one way or the other. I don't know if I ever will watch it, but I've never been closed off to it. I just haven't really found the time, essentially.
Yeah.
With all the other things to watch. The one thing, real quick, that I do want to say is that I think ending a series as popular as this, or even like a series half as popular as this, when you create something that is so ingrained in pop culture and ingrained in people's lives, and they love it and they're thinking about it so much
for the better part of the decade.
Yeah, for this long, like you're fighting an uphill battle when you end it, because you're taking away something that people love, essentially, and being like, you will have no more of this, and here's the last of it that you get. Like, it's tough to make that a totally happy experience. There's going to be bittersweetness, and it's really easy to focus on the bitter, I think.
Well, it's more fun to do that. It's the initial reaction because you're unsatisfied, and you want to find people who are also unsatisfied, and so that means you're right, and they fucked up, and they should remake it because they're pieces of shit.
Right, yeah. I think, like, it's so hard to wrap up something like that and be like, you're not getting any more of this. We've taken it away from you. No more new Game of Thrones. I hope you're happy. No one's going to be happy.
Right. Especially with a show like this, because no one was calling for the end. Like,
right.
None of the fans wanted it. The author himself was like, yeah, they could go on, like, 10 seasons. The only people that wanted it to end were the people making it and the people acting in it.
Right. It's inevitable, really, I guess, unless you're Grey's Anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's all my thoughts is like, you know, it's all a bunch of hype, and time will tell. And I think it's a sign that maybe you don't love the show as much as you say you do, when you can have as strong of a knee-jerk reaction after one season and not actually take the time to like consider it, if that makes sense.
Sure. Well,
I think
I'm calling out a lot of people there, but I'm calling out a lot of people saying maybe they're not true Game of Thrones fans. Fans.
So here's what I will say. I want to defend some of the people who are like freaking out right now and like grinding their teeth at you. I agree with what you're saying in the sense that if you've dedicated 8 years to something, 9 years to something, and it ends in a way that you don't like, and your initial reaction is to burn it all down, freak out on the internet, maybe rethink your position. If something gave you this much joy, try to find the good in the end, you know? Even if it's not perfect. We don't live in a world where everything has to be amazing and perfect or terrible and shitty. There can be nuance in between.
Yeah.
But also what I would say, as a book fan who has been looking forward to this for years, I am inevitably disappointed. Like, if you'd have talked to me in 2013 when they were still adapting the books and you said, what is the future of this show going to hold? I would have been so excited. But then eventually I realized around season 5 that was not going to be the show that I was going to get. So I made peace a long time ago with the show that we were getting versus the show that I always envisioned in my brain. And I think a lot of people probably didn't do that.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I think that's enough for Game of Thrones right now, for no spoilers at least. Maybe Chris and I can talk about it some other time. If you guys want more Game of Thrones talk, let us know. If you guys have thoughts on the finale of Game of Thrones and the final season, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I think we should move on to a season of a TV show that we have all watched, but we will still keep relatively spoiler-free for the sake of the listeners. And that is Barry Season 2, also on HBO.
Also just ended.
Yep.
The season 2 ended, not the series.
That is correct. And so, let's start off with Chris. What did you think of Barry Season 2? And also, what did you think of Barry Season 1?
I like Barry Season 1 quite a bit. I enjoyed it a lot. I think you guys both had valid complaints that I didn't dislike quite as much as you guys did. I do think Season 2 corrects a lot of those problems. And yeah, I really enjoyed Barry Season 2. I think the writing is really good. There are some really great episodes. The direction of the episodes and the acting, that's just all around, it's really great. There is, I'm really warming up to Bill Hader. I think he is really great in this season, both acting, and he directs the last episode, and he directed the episode, I guess, spoiler-free, he directed a really good action-based episode.
Yeah, he directed an episode called Ronnie Lily.
Yeah.
which it might be the best episode of the series.
Yes.
I would agree.
Yeah, so I'm warming up to Bill Hader. From seeing him in Saturday Night Live, I would have never expected this from him, and I'm just really impressed with him. And a side note, Criterion Channel actually has an interview with him where he talks about all these different Criterion films. Really interesting, really intelligent guy. So, yeah, I really like this a lot. I don't know that there's that much more to say about it without spoilers. What did you think, Justin?
Briefly, I thought Barry Season 2 was great. You know, as you said, we all watched Season 1. We did an episode where we covered Season 1 alongside The Tale, I believe. This was, I guess, about a year ago. So if you want to listen to all of our thoughts, you can go back there. But you're right, Mike and I did have some complaints. I have not had many of those complaints, if any, of Season 2. Maybe there's been tiny moments, but my biggest complaints were solved in Season 2. It's almost like they figured out the right tone and the right balance between humor and darkness, I guess, and which characters should be humorous and which characters should be dark.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they got that from our podcast, listening to it. They heard your complaints specifically and corrected them.
You're welcome, HBO and Bill Hader.
But yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I have to echo a lot of what Chris said. I'm not going to literally echo it and say it again, but a lot of what Chris said applies to me. That one episode, Ronnie Lily, is fantastic and one of the most interesting episodes of a TV show I've seen. And I admire the balls that it took to make an episode like that, all the way around. And I think the show it's super easy to watch. I really like having an 8-episode season of 30-minute episodes, right? It's basically 4 hours, so it's like watching 2 movies, roughly. Mm-hmm. You can get it done in one night if you're ambitious, 2 nights if you're not that ambitious.
I literally watched the entire Season 2 in one day.
Yeah, and so I really love the format. It's a bit like a long movie. I also love how Barry Season 2 it doesn't necessarily feel like Season 2 as much as it does an extension of Barry as one big long movie. And I like that. I think maybe that's arguable. There is some sort of sectioned off things with it, but overall, I like the flow. It doesn't feel as separated as I worried it would be with the end of Season 1. And that's the last thing that I will say. And go on to Mike. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm going to echo all of you guys' thoughts. I did have some complaints about Season 1, although I still liked it. I think Season 2 is better in every way. It's smarter, funnier, better acted, better written, just everything all around. 1,000% better. I do have, I guess, some complaints, and I think that would be that I wish these episodes were slightly longer. I didn't feel that way in Season 1, but in Season 2, I feel like if you're only going to give me 8 episodes, I would like more. I don't think there's enough character in Barry Season 2. What they do give me makes me want more, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because what they improve so much on Season 1 is so good that I honestly feel like the season is too short. I think that keeps it stronger, obviously. I would rather them stick to the 8 episodes than overextend and try to go to 10 and drop in quality whatsoever. But I think it's good to leave people wanting more, unless you're wrapping up your show like we mentioned with Game of Thrones earlier, in which case you should probably just do what's required. But
yeah,
as far as Barry goes, this season, I just can't stress it enough. It is funny. It is thrilling. It is interesting. It is stressful. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it leaves you to where you cannot wait for the next episode. In that way, it reminds me of a slightly less rewarding Better Call Saul. And I mean that because Better Call Saul has 40-minute episodes, 44-minute episodes after we cut commercials out. And there's 12 a season or 10 a season or something like that. And Barry Season 2 reminds me of the same level of intelligence, of interest, of just being compelling. And when one episode ends, you just can't help but wonder how they plan on wrapping this up in a satisfying way, Mm-hmm. So anyone who likes Barry, especially Season 2, I cannot stress this enough. Watch Better Call Saul. All the best elements of Barry are present in Better Call Saul. And this was a good itch to scratch while I'm waiting on Season 5 of that show. And I cannot wait for Barry Season 3 now. I could wait for Barry Season 2. I wasn't even wanting it or not wanting it. I wasn't thinking about it one way or the other. And Season 1 it could have been canceled and I'd have been fine. But now, season 2, the way it ends, I can't wait for season 3. And I don't know if I like that as much, to be honest. I mean, like, I can't wait for season 3, which is a good thing. But season 2 is not as much of a standalone piece as season 1 was.
Yeah. Basically, they've left themselves in a place where you can't cancel.
Yeah. After the first season, people would walk up to Bill Hader and they're like, "You had such a great season. Don't overstay your welcome. Just end it here." Like, he's like, "You want me to not do a second season?" He's like, "Because you liked the first season so much, you want me not to do a second one?"
Sounds like a lot of people have been burned.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Would you say vice versa? If people like Better Call Saul and they haven't checked out Barry yet, they should check out Barry?
Yes, and if you don't get initially turned on by season 1, just keep powering through. It's short enough.
Yeah.
And there's enough about Barry season 1 to like.
Yeah, and Barry season 1, like, I'm making it sound bad. Everyone loves Barry season 1, except for, like, me, who I like it, just don't love it.
Cool. Well, that's it for me on Barry season 2. Can't wait for 3.
Yeah, watch Better Call Saul, Justin.
Yeah, I'm very excited for season 3.
I don't get it.
I'll draw you a diagram later.
Thanks.
Anytime, buddy.
All right, are we ready to move into our review of John Wick, Chapter 3, Parabellum?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Jonathan, what have you done?
To dream the impossible dream.
There is no escape for you. The high table wants your life.
To right the unrightable wrong.
Tell me what you want.
Passage.
I can't help you.
To reach the unreachable star.
Do you expect him to make it out? A $14 million bounty on his head. And everyone in the city wants a piece of it. I say the odds are about even. Dark, 5 seconds.
John Wick, excommunicado in effect in 3,
2,
1.
Okay, so as always with our review of John Wick 3, we are going to start out in non-spoilers. We're going to be speaking generally. We won't give anything away about the film, so if you haven't seen it and just want to hear a review of what we think, you can keep listening, and then we might do a spoiler section, but if we do, we'll give you a warning. We'll play a bumper, and you can check out the show notes now and see a timestamp of exactly when we get into spoilers so that you can pause the podcast before then, go see John Wick 3, Chapter 3, Parabellum, whatever this movie's called.
Nailed it.
And thank you. And then come back and finish the podcast.
That's right. So, John Wick, Chapter 3, Parabellum was directed by Chad Stahelski, starring Keanu Reeves, Halle Berry, and Ian McShane. The IMDb synopsis says, Super assassin John Wick is on the run after killing a member of the International Assassins Guild, and with a $14 million price tag on his head, he is the target of hitmen and women everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That is an accurate description.
So accurate.
Yep. So, without further ado, who wants to kick us off on their thoughts on the John Wick franchise and John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum?
I think you should go first, Mike. I'm curious what you think.
All right. Okay, so first I will talk about my relationship with this franchise, and that is that when the first one came out, it felt like a cool breath of fresh air to me. I really enjoy action movies, but rarely am I impressed by the mainstream action movies that we get. So when John Wick gained good word of mouth for its action and its inherent detail to action, I was interested. And I agree that it's filmed well, it's simple, it's impressive, and I really enjoyed John Wick. But then Chapter 2 came out, and I felt that it was okay, but kind of diminishing returns. Still impressive, but ultimately, just more of the same. And I think that's how I feel about Chapter 3 Parabellum, the same way I did about Chapter 2, which is that it's good, but it's longer than 2 hours, and I feel like it would have been a better, tighter, more enjoyable movie if it were like 80 to 90 minutes. I can only watch John Wick shoot people in the head for so many hours, you know? And I thought about watching the second one again before seeing this one, but I didn't, and I'm ultimately glad that I didn't, because I feel like if I watched multiple hours of John Wick leading into this one, then I would need a breather. Because if I'm really thinking about it, I would say that I think Chapter 3, Parabellum, is better than just Chapter 2 of John Wick. The action is more ambitious, it's more creative, there are more interesting fight scenes that aren't just exclusively shooting people in the head, which is nice. But still, I feel like this movie needs to be trimmed down, like way down. So it's impressive. I like where its head's at. But ultimately, this is not a franchise that has a meaty enough story for 2-hour installments each time. And that's my thoughts. So what say you, Chris?
Yeah, it's funny that you said what you did about watching John Wick for only a certain set amount of hours, because my experience with the John Wick franchise started this last Saturday, and I watched all 3 movies within a 24-hour period.
Nice.
And I will say that I did get tired of watching John Wick shoot people in the head. And that's on me, because I hadn't watched it before, right? The things I will say about, the franchise as a whole is I like the way it looks. I think the choreography is done very well, and it is interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I think watching all 3 movies in a row, it does get repetitive. But that's, it's not really supposed to be done that way. I just happen to have done it that way.
Yeah, it's not like Marvel where you can binge them.
Yeah.
It's very exhausting. It's very, like, adrenaline-based. It's very, like, visceral thrills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you need a Gatorade after?
Yeah, like... During, man, I just got like an intravenous thing and stuck it in my vein, and
somewhere in Chapter 2 you were like, whew.
Yeah, I'm dehydrated, guys.
My electrolytes are down.
What I will say, though, just as a general thing for the whole franchise is I like a lot of these movies. I like a lot about it. But there's like one thing missing that just doesn't get me to connect with the films. Like there's something missing that doesn't help me connect. And maybe it's the kind of the story that just doesn't... like in the first one, it's about his dog dying and stuff like that. And I think it's almost supposed to be kind of funny because he's doing all this about his dog. I just don't necessarily care that much. I like dogs, but I don't necessarily ever care that much. And there's never anything that gives me emotional suspense. John Wick is kicking a lot of ass, right? But why am I emotionally involved in John Wick? And I'm not. And so I need to be emotionally involved with John Wick as he's fighting and doing all this stuff in order for this movie to become better than just an action movie where they're just beating a lot of people up. And I think that a lot of this stuff looks really cool. It looks like a comic book. Actually, we were talking last week when we talked about Pokemon, about the best video game adaptation. And I think this may be close. It's not an adaptation, but I think that there's a lot that it takes from video games. I thought a lot about video games as I was watching it. But yeah, so that's kind of what I think. I think that there's like a third element, and I guess it's probably emotional stakes, that is missing from these movies that don't allow me to engage with them in the way that I should. And so for that, it's definitely worth seeing, I think. Don't watch them all at once. That's my recommendation. But I think it's
as someone who likes the franchise slightly more than Chris, it sounds like, I do not recommend binging these movies. Space them out.
Yeah, exactly.
They are not meaty enough to binge.
Exactly, yeah. And it's just, there's only so many times you can see like Keanu Reeves tackle a guy with the arm. He does that like leg hold with his arm. Like, I saw that so many times this weekend.
Yeah, he like cracks someone's arm while holding him.
Yeah, that happens, he puts him like so a wrestling move. Yeah. Anyways, that's what I think. There's just something holding me. Well, emotional stakes. We've already discovered what it is. Emotional stakes is what's holding me back.
That's why I recommended that these movies be 80 minutes each.
Yeah, or instead of like take out one set piece and put some character work in there somehow. Anyways,
I would argue that there's not any amount of emotional beats and scenes you can put in these movies to make anyone care about John Wick.
That's probably true.
Emotionally speaking.
I will say it is really great that Ian McShane is in there. I do like Ian McShane.
He adds a little bit of flavor to the whole thing.
I think Halle Berry in the third one is fun, and I like the dogs. So
Yeah,
just
after
as far
Justin
as the
talks
third
about
one.
his stuff, I want to talk about Halle Berry a little bit.
Okay, all right, Justin, what do you think?
Well, I'm not too different from either of you guys. I'm a little bit closer to Chris in most ways, and including the way that I had to watch the second film because I had only ever seen the first John Wick, which I did watch like only maybe 4 or 5 months ago. And I liked the first one all right. I think there's enough there to make an entertaining movie with the motivation of the dog. Like you guys said, it's kind of funny. And it's someone getting revenge for a dog dying is like kind of makes them likable for a while.
Well, the John Wick 1 is like simple and sparse enough to be charming.
Yeah, exactly. Charming is a good word for it, and for the whole motivation of the first one, like they'd all be sitting around this dog. It's enjoyable. I like that. And about halfway through the second one, if not sooner, I was very much over that, and that was no longer doing it for me. Which I watched the second one on Friday night, and then I saw John Wick 3 on Sunday. So I had a little bit of space, which helped, but I will echo that, like, through the third one, it was tough to get through. I checked my watch so much and, like, was doing a lot of math in my head to figure out, like, how long till it was over and, like, tried to guess how many minutes of trailers I had so I could, you know what I mean? I was just doing all of those, like, gymnastics rather than, like, being able to sit there and enjoy the movie. I find myself, I guess, very confused watching the movie at times because, like, these movies have so much praise behind them and people seem to love them. And I guess early sneak preview, we are part of an article that's going to be coming out on Cinelinks of like the 50 greatest movies of the 2010s, of the 2010 decade, right? And on the short list, as voted by like all the people contributing to that, were John Wick and John Wick 2, right? And
not voted on by us, I would like to say. At least not
voted
me.
on by me, for sure. Yeah, I don't know exactly how you guys voted, but I assume.
I like John Wick 1, but I don't think it deserves top of the decade. And John Wick 2 certainly doesn't deserve top of anything.
Right. So I'm confused watching it of like what people are latching onto, because I had the same problem that Chris has and the same problem that you mentioned, Mike. It's like I do not latch onto these movies at all. I find them boring. I find John Wick boring. I find everything uninteresting other than there are moments of very cool action. And that is not enough to get me through.
So as someone who appreciates action a lot and who probably likes the John Wick franchise the most, and I feel bad because I feel like this franchise is very beloved and I feel like none of us really love it as much as like the average person does. So I want to acknowledge that right now, which is to say, sorry, fans of John Wick. I know this is a very popular franchise. I like the franchise. I like Chapter 3. I like Chapter 2. I agree with you that John Wick is a boring character.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that action and creative action and action made with love is exactly what people show up for.
Yeah.
What I will say to that is I would point to the Raid movies or the first John Wick and say that those movies are more interesting and more compelling from start to finish than John Wick Chapter 2 or Chapter 3 Parabellum. Although I will say that John Wick Chapter 3 has some very impressive action scenes, especially in the first act, with all the knife fights and everything. Those are extraordinary. Problem is, the movie's an hour and a half longer than that.
Right. Yeah. Basically, I don't see what sets this movie apart from something like The Raid, or what sets 3 and 2 apart from 1. They don't do anything to improve upon themselves. They just stay the same note.
Well, like I was going to say, like the Raid 1 is like 80 minutes. It's a bunch of guys in a building with very creative fight scenes. Like stuff in those fight scenes that you haven't seen in any other movie before. Very creative, very interesting. The Raid Chapter 2, it's like a 2 hour and 18-minute movie, which is very long. Almost like the John Wick movies. But that movie is not nearly as bland as these, because the scenery changes a whole bunch. Whereas like John Wick has very impressive action. I feel like they don't try to top themselves in the action. Like they don't crescendo with the most impressive action being at the end. it's all just kind of consistent throughout. Whereas like The Raid or The Raid 2, those movies, whenever they end, you're watching the movie crescendo into some of the most impressive fighting and choreography and fight scenes that you've seen in the whole franchise. Whereas I think my main complaint with John Wick, especially 3, since that's the one we're reviewing today, is that the movie peaks with Halle Berry in Act 2.
That is a very, very slight peak for me.
Maybe
I gotta be honest.
But if you're going for action scenes and that's what you're there to see, if that's what your admission price is, right, is like creative, fun action, that's what John Wick means to you, it needs to crescendo.
Right. So do you want to talk about that then, like the Halle Berry?
Sure. I think Halle Berry, their action scenes with John Wick and Halle Berry together were, I think, the most interesting of the movie. Her using her dogs was really interesting.
Right, yes.
To see how like a woman version of John Wick would need like some help from like her 2 canine pals is really cool. It's a different style than John Wick does, but you can see how they're from like the same school of doing things. It's a new version of a female action hero where she doesn't just like run and fling her legs around people's head and throw them on the ground like Black Widow does in all the Marvel movies. You know, I feel like all the female superheroes have to do that kind of thing now.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of refreshing that her hero feels a little different. I've never seen dogs used in an action movie quite this way before, and it's impressive and fun and cool to watch them. If you ask me, the movie would have been much better had Halle Berry been there from beginning to end. But unfortunately, she's not in the movie nearly as much as the advertising would have you believe.
I think the thing I was most impressed about with Halle Berry, and having watched all 3 of them recently, was in the first John Wick, there's a female assassin, and when she and John Wick fight, it's very clearly like they do everything they can to obscure her face. So, because she's not doing those stunts, right? I think Halle Berry trained probably just as much as Keanu Reeves for those sequences so that she could do those. And that's really impressive to me, I think.
Yeah, it seems like I don't think a motto is the right word, but a mission statement of this film to do the stunts and have the actors doing as much as possible, because I remember this specifically in 3, and I can't remember if this was in 1 or 2, but I'm pretty sure it was in chapter 2, where somebody is watching Buster Keaton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's on the big wall there.
Yeah, it's on the big wall in 3, but there's something else is happening in 2 where someone's watching some Buster Keaton. So it's very much like the director being like, "This is my influence, Buster Keaton," doing his own stunts so that you really know it's him. And they do a lot of that in the movie, which is certainly commendable.
I was reminded of Mission Impossible, the Mission Impossible franchise as well, because of them doing their own stunts.
Yeah, there's a lot of head-to-toe shots within these action scenes and not a lot of close-ups, which, throws back to, I guess, things I don't think we've actually talked about on this show, but I know we've talked about Singing in the Rain here and there, but like it's the same concept as like the older musicals being head to toe wide shots. So you see that it's really the actor doing all of the moves and not a bunch of close-ups and editing together the dance, right?
Right.
Fight
and
scene.
that's the appeal of the franchise, right? Is the same appeal that musical enthusiasts have, right? Like a well-made action scene is akin to a well-made musical number.
I was actually going to compare it to Singing in the Rain, specifically because I think in Singing in the Rain, the story, the things that happen outside of the musical numbers aren't really that great. And that's
Disagree.
Okay, we can disagree on that, but I think that's the same thing here. The musical numbers or the action sequences are pretty phenomenal in John Wick. It's the stuff that's on the outside that's not super great,
Agreed. I wonder if any potential assassins or people who want to work for the assassin company show up for work or like the job interview and they get turned away because they don't look like they shop at Hot Topic or have like a tattoo. Like, excuse me, but I can't help but notice your lack of tattoos and 50s clothing. I just don't think you're going to be a good fit here.
50s clothing and piercings.
Yeah.
Well,
it's just like, this is so lame how everyone has to look so alternative.
Right. Well, I think it's a chicken and the egg sort of thing where do they get the tattoos and act out and become dark and, hot topic-y because they are assassins and they're surrounded by all this darkness? Or do they show up with those? I don't know.
Which one comes first?
Exactly.
Or maybe they get the tattoo and there's something wrong with the ink, and so they get corrupted and become assassins.
Was pretty constantly astounded by the amount of people that work for this company. I'm pretty sure
everyone in New York is an assassin.
Like, I was gonna say like 30 to 40% of the population of the world is an assassin. It seems,
or working with them in some way,
right.
like all the homeless people.
Right. So, I mean, how many people are actually out there assassinating people? Because if like 30 to 40% of the people are assassins, and each of them assassinates one person, that's like Thanos level of like wiping people out.
I actually think that none of the assassins are very good at their job. John Wick is the only one that's good at his job.
That's why they're all impressed with him.
Yeah. So that's why. And whenever like they try to kill each other, they both fail. And so there's a lot of failure happening. They don't actually. But John Wick, man, he'll kill you. He can do it. So. Yeah.
So that actually leads me to a couple of questions I have for spoilers. So do we have anything else we want to go over in non-spoilers?
We do have some spoiler-free listener questions.
Let's do it.
If you guys want to go through those real quick. All right. So, one of them isn't a question. It's from Matt the Pharaoh at wizard_Matt on Twitter. And he just says, best knife death, which I don't know which one he's talking about. And I don't think we should say specifically, but for the people who are listening,
I know
and
which
haven't
one
seen it
he's
yet.
talking about. There's one scene in the first act with a knife fight.
Yeah.
And there's an execution at the end of that knife fight that is very cool.
Yeah,
I know.
I'm pretty sure I know what it is too. I don't want to say what it is, Let's let the listeners be excited.
No, don't say it, but just know that there's some cool knife play. Like, one thing I'll say about this movie is they spice things up from just shooting people in the head, which is what I feel like 1 and 2 mostly were. I feel like there's some more actual like legitimate karate, kung fu, knife fighting in this one. So
yeah, there's still a hell of a lot of shooting people in the head, though.
That's true.
All right. So next question is from Matt Ward on Twitter at Real Matt Ward. He says, at this point in the franchise, does it matter anymore why John kills people? Has the how people die become the reason to watch these movies?
No, and yes.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that. And I think that's to the movie's detriment, but, I'm probably a little bit alone in that.
I would say it does not matter why John Wick kills people as long as he is killing them in self-defense now that he has avenged his dog. I feel like if he were just to go murder a bunch of random people, it would probably matter then. As long as he's the hero, then it doesn't matter. Yeah. And also, yes, it only matters how people die. See the knife conversation we just had moments ago.
Sure. All right. So last spoiler-free question. This comes from Mike Imal on Facebook, who is the host of the Cinemas podcast, by the way.
Yeah.
He asks, if you guys were assassins, what would your weapons of choice be? So, Chris, go first. What is your weapon of choice?
I thought about this earlier today, and the only thing I could come up with would be the silent but deadly method. Gas.
Are you going to fart on them?
Yeah, I would just like fart in their general direction, and then they'd pass out, and then I could move on from there.
This method takes years.
I've been developing it for years. Like eating fast food. My bowels are not good.
Gross. This is gross.
Yeah. Moving on.
All right. So I'm kind of taking this in the realm of like something that fits with my personality as opposed to like I just want the biggest, most badass weapon. And I would go with a guitar string. Like I would choke people, like strangle them with a guitar string.
Like Hereditary.
Because I play guitar.
With a piano string.
Yes. But I'm not that good at piano, so
guitar it is.
With a guitar string. Yeah. So that would be mine. Mike, what is yours?
Goodness, I have no idea. Let's see. If I were going to be an assassin, I would think an ice pick. Or not an ice pick, like an icicle.
Oh.
Would be the best method, right? You could stab them and then just walk away and let it melt.
Yeah. That's true.
But you only get one off of stabbing, so you got to be really good at stabbing people because I feel like most icicles would break before they'll pierce, like, bone.
Right. Yeah, stab them in the squishy spot.
Yeah, you got to stab them in a meaty area.
Yeah, and maybe have more than one, and you have to, like, grab the icicle quickly. Yeah, I mean, you can't carry it around too long, basically. Yeah. Like, you couldn't break off icicles and then, like, drive an hour.
Right.
To go kill somebody. You'd have to kill them
Right.
where icicles are.
And I can't like break it off the roof of wherever they're at and then like walk over to them and then try to stab them and be like, oh, hold on, hang on, I gotta get another one real quick.
So what if somebody comes up to you in the middle of the summer, they're like, hey, I want you to kill this guy. You're like, you're going to have to wait till November
That's
sometime.
why God invented freezers, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go.
So
Thanks, God.
So
I was gonna say I thought you had the summer off, but I guess you're finding ways around it.
Yep.
Yeah, I was trying to get you the way off. So if John Wick 4, which already has a release date, if he is gassy and kills people with icicles and piano wire, they owe us some money.
Yeah, they'll know that they're one of the fans of this show.
Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe not anymore if they're making the movies and they found out that we're all kind of mixed on them.
I guess maybe if there's emotional stakes in their film, John Wick 4, then they know we've listened to them, or they've listened to us.
Yeah, so that does it for spoiler-free listener questions. So let's move into spoilers. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Spoil away!
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
How many cigarettes you got up there? I'll tell you all about it.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
And here we go.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to talk about in spoilers was the main boss guy. He was played by Mark Dacascos? Dacascos?
Yeah. Sounds right.
Anyways, he was the businessman sushi guy at first, and then he was also, as it turns out, a professional assassin who leads other professional assassins, as everyone in the John Wick universe tends to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's also a really big nerd for John Wick as well.
Right.
I feel like his character was just a mood ring. I could not peg this guy at all.
Yeah.
Did you guys have that problem?
I don't know. Yes, I've definitely had that problem.
Yeah, it was an odd character, I think, just in general. And yeah, I'm not quite sure what to make. I do, along with that character, but I do like how all the characters are so honorable, and they're in the middle of a death fight, but they.
Oh yeah, like the guys from the raid. I actually had that on my next thing to. I enjoyed how some of the enemies like they just respect him, and like not every fight has to be a fight to the death.
Mm-hmm.
Like a couple of like the main henchmen guys, the guys that are from the raid movies specifically, like they give John Wick a couple like tries to get on his game, you know, because they want like the full John Wick experience, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And then like when he beats them, he's just like, "All right, I'm leaving now," and they're like, "Cool, man, bye. We're gonna lay here for a while and heal."
Yeah.
You know, but like I like how it wasn't a fight to the death. Like these guys. They don't care about anyone's agenda. They're just there because they want to fight John Wick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I enjoyed that part of it, you know?
I don't like that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't like that they didn't die?
Like, if this wasn't a universe where every other person was an assassin and we hadn't spent 3 movies in this universe where everyone was a professional assassin trying to kill him, then I would agree with you. Like, if this were John Wick 1 and that happened, I'd be like, I don't know about that. But since this is John Wick 3... and in every movie, every single person's like, hey, you're John Wick. That's cool. I don't mind so much that they finally cash in on his reputation for a couple random henchmen.
Yeah, I guess it bothers me that we spend a whole movie where he's got this $14-15 million price tag on his head, and everybody, even the people who suck and shouldn't even give it a go, are trying to kill him. That like, the one time he gets bested is by people who are like honorable enough to not kill him. Like it just seemed lame and convenient and didn't make any sense to me. And I get what you're saying, and I can appreciate that. It just didn't work for me that way.
Makes sense. I get it, but it reminded me very much of like the honorable samurai method of doing things. Like very much like I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of that with like the hotel and don't conduct business on the hotel and
yeah, but that's different. Those are
grounds.
Rules. Those aren't honor. Those are rules. I enjoy the rules too. Like those are what actually make what little interesting twists and turns in all 3 of these movies there are those rules. But agreed. I think in this one you don't just get rules, you get like honor amongst thieves, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of those rules, I like that aspect of John Wick. I really like, and that's the world building. Yeah, the world building. Like, I don't necessarily always understand it. Like, how much is a coin worth? What does a coin get you? Because it seems to get you all sorts of different things.
I don't think you're supposed to buy anything with them. I think they're just like I have this. Listen to me.
He'll give coins like for each dead body that he needs to clean up at his house type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like
okay,
that kind of thing.
It's been a while since I've seen the first two.
And the people always take the coins and like do something with them, and he's got a big stash of them. Like if it was just look what I have, it seems like you could get with like a badge.
I guess it's payment for like the high table like cleaner upper dudes who are like supposed to keep John Wick out of jail.
Yeah, and
like,
actually,
here's your tip.
Right, Ian McShane. Oh, you know who wasn't in the third one? And I thought I was gonna. I'm so sorry. Did you guys see so the policeman was in the first two? You know, so remember in the first one, he's like, "You back at work, John?" You know, and he sees all the dead bodies behind him.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And in the second one, he's in there too because like his house burned down. And so he's like, "You back at work, John?" And I was expecting to see him in the third one. Did you guys see the policeman in the third one at all?
No.
Honestly, I don't remember.
Yeah. I'm disappointed because I was looking for him.
It's been a long time since I've seen John Wick 1 or 2, so I don't really remember what he looks like.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, that's all I've got.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't have much for spoilers. People get shot in the head a bunch.
Do we want to ask her that question?
Yeah. All right. So this comes from Mickey Chiachi on Facebook, and he says, "Did you think the setting of the climactic fights was visually distracting? I found it sort of hard to focus on the action and ended up sort of zoning out, which is very disappointing because we don't normally see martial arts performances of that caliber in major American films." I'll answer first. I guess I did not find it visually distracting because it took me talking to Chris earlier before we recorded to remember what the setting was. So it just, I once he said it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that was it. But like I racked my brain for like an hour when I saw this question to try to remember what it was. So I didn't focus on it too much. It didn't distract me. I remember they did some kind of cool stuff with it, but what do you guys think?
Yes and no. I found the setting itself to be kind of distracting, like kind of like that one scene in Skyfall whenever like there's that one dude who's like ready to shoot off of like a roof and there's like a sign with a bunch of glass and like you can't tell what's going on, but people are fighting behind panes of glass and there's reflections and everything going all over the place. Like it's designed in such a way to where like you're supposed to be visually confused as of to like what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess long story short, yes, I agree with him. It is a little distracting, and I find that they probably just thought like, okay, well, this fight is probably just another standard fight, so let's put it in a really epic looking place. And so I feel like that's what is the entire reason it's staged there, is because it looks that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. Visually, it is very stunning. I love the way it looks. It is very also...
But it's busy.
Yes, it's also very possible that it distracts from the actual fight that's happening.
If that had been like a henchman fight, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But you put the climactic fight there, and I agree. I think it is a little distracting, but I think they had to do that because it is a climactic fight, and the fight itself isn't any more or less interesting than like 3 or 4 of the fights before it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think they used the set, or maybe planned to use the set, to do these little reflection tricks where like someone walks and then they disappear. But to me, they did it so little that it ultimately didn't really matter, and it didn't seem to have like huge effects on the fight because, as you said, it kind of just turned into a normal standard John Wick fight. So I'm wondering if like that's what they were thinking, but I feel like they kind of went on a weird middle ground where they just did like 1 or maybe 2 things with it and not enough to really take advantage of it.
All right, cool. Those are our thoughts on John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. Does anyone have anything else?
Nope, I've said my piece.
Okay. And so, real quick, we have, before we end the show, a special segment from our friend Peyton Paulette, who is at the Cannes Film Festival right now, and who has sent us in a report live, or not live, but directly from Cannes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so stick around, and then at the end of this, at the end of his little segment, we're going to kind of talk about it a little bit and kind of see what we think.
Yeah. It's his first week, basically, of Cannes and the things that he's watched, and at the end of the next week he'll send us another one, so I'll have another one of these next week, but for now, part 1.
Okay, so here we go. So to start off, I want to talk about what the Cannes Film Festival is, because I think some of your listeners might not know what the Cannes Film Festival is. So the Cannes Film Festival is probably the largest film festival in the world, if not one of the most prestigious. And it's not just one festival. There is the main competition, I think, that everybody knows about, and this is the films that are vying for some sort of award. Best Director, Best Screenplay, the Palme d'Or. So those are the main films in the competition, and that's what we typically know as the Cannes Film Festival, but there's a lot of other little festivals going on at the same time. There's also out-of-competition films. Now, these are high-profile premieres. These are also films that are looking for distributors. So, for example, last year when I was at the film festival, Solo, the Han Solo Star Wars film, premiered out of competition. Wasn't vying for any awards. They just wanted a fancy premiere. The John Travolta film Gotti also had a premiere here at the Cannes Film Festival, and it was out of competition. And their main goal was they were trying to find a distributor, which I can tell you a funny story about that later if you would like to hear it. But that's it. Main competition and out of competition films. There's also the Director's Fortnight, which was started in 1969 by Jean-Luc Godard in, opposition to the Cannes Film Festival. They felt that the films that were being selected that year were highly commercial, and they wanted to create their own film festival in protest to the main competition. So that created the Director's Fortnight, which has then been folded into the Cannes Film Festival. And these are films that are, a little bit more arty, a little bit more daring, and a little bit more interesting. Past that, we also have Critics Week, which these are critics' picks for films. And they typically, I don't know why they call it a week. I think it goes on for 3 days. There's also Un Certain Regard, which are highly experimental, super weird art films, which I typically try to see everything on the Un Certain Regard because it's probable that you'll never see those types of movies again after they premiered. And then something that just happened and they just started doing a couple of years ago is called Acide or Acid. And these are even more weird than the shit that you see on Un Certain Regard. These are really weird, arty films. Kiarostami, I don't know, that's not his name. I don't know, remember. Somebody had a film here, and it was like 3.5 hours long. It's like Lav Diaz films, like really weird experimental films, stuff like Andy Warhol type of stuff. Sometimes they can be interesting, sometimes not, but that's it. So main competition, out of competition, Director's Fortnight, Critics Week, Un Certain Regard, and Acide. And then on top of that, we also have the Marché du Film. The Marché du Film is the world's largest film market. And these are just films that are from all over the world, and there are little booths set up in this really big, exposition center. And people are just trying to sell the rights to their films to anybody who wants to buy them. And there are people walk around, and day in, day out, that's all they do is do deals here. That's weirdly enough, that's 70% of the population of people that come to the Cannes Film Festival. They aren't interested in watching movies, seeing them, going to red carpet premieres or anything like that. The only thing that they want to do is buy or sell their movies. So that's going on as well. So in any given day, there's between 30 and 60 films screening. So it's every day. So there's tons of stuff going on, and I have to be pretty selective about the films that I see here. Movies that I've seen thus far. Now, I've been here a week. The festival kicked off this past Tuesday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and today is Saturday morning, and I'm going to go see a screening tonight. But what I've seen thus far. I saw The Dead Don't Die. That was the film that kicked off the festival. That's the Jim Jarmusch zombie movie. So I got red carpet tickets for that, dressed up in a tux. We walked the red carpet. Jim Jarmusch was there. The entire cast and crew was in attendance, and we watched the film. It was a very strange movie. It's it's interesting. I have to kind of give it a thumbs down, though. It's super campy. It's very funny. It's super self-aware of itself. But I kept trying to imagine what the movie would be like if it didn't have the cast that it had and it wasn't lit and shot the way Jim Jarmusch did it. And it would be a kind of just an okay student feature film. It's exactly what it felt like. That being said, there were good things about it. The cast really elevated it. They were playing against type most of the time. That was what made the movie work. was the cast doing what they did, saying what they said, and everybody knew exactly the type of movie that they were in. But it was a bit of a slog here and there. It's a much more of a return of form for him in the last few years, because it's a lot. I don't know if you guys have seen Limits of Control, which was just like bottom of the barrel Jim Jarmusch to me, but is nowhere near as good as Only Lovers Left Alive, which was one of my favorite films that year that it came out. So I would give it a thumbs down. Don't discount it, but just go into the movie knowing that it's not going to be as great as what you think it is. I was a little disappointed, maybe because my own expectations were kind of high for it. Next film I saw was a film called Les Miserables, which has nothing to do with the musical that we're familiar with other than the title. This is a astonishing movie. It's my pick for Palme d'Or. I really hope it wins. It is a main competition film, and it is astonishing. It's the La Haine for the 21st century. If anybody's seen La Haine, it's very much that type of film. It's the life of what it is to be a refugee living on the streets, scraping by, and it's just populated by a bunch of street kids trying to make their lives better. And, you know, it's just this roller coaster of dread, and you know that they're going to just die at the end and nothing is going to turn out good. It's just a powerful, powerful, great movie. So big thumbs up on that one. I saw Rocket Man, which this was an out of competition screening because it's a high profile flick. I'm going to give it a thumbs up. That being said, some caveats. First of all, it is way better than Bohemian Rhapsody. But then again, most things are. I was not a fan of that movie. This is everything that Bohemian Rhapsody should have been and everything I wished that it was. It was helmed by Dexter Fletcher, a very good visual filmmaker. If you're familiar with any of his stuff, he brought it all the way here. It was halfway. It was very reminiscent of All That Jazz is what it kind of felt like, because it's very much, we're inside of Elton John's head. We're seeing him remembering his youth, his rise to stardom, and him overcoming his problems. And, you know, if there's a main theme to the whole thing, it was, you know, trying and learning to give and receive love. And it was just really, really well done. They weave the songs in flawlessly. It was like a fantasy musical. So I really enjoyed it. It got a little ham-fisted there at the end, but yeah, most of these things do. So there's that. So certainly worth watching. Next, I saw Too Old to Die Young, the Nicholas Winding Refn. I believe it's supposed to be a TV series on Amazon Prime, and what we saw was either the first 2 episodes or just the season premiere. I'm not really sure on that, but it was a little over 2 hours long, and it was a complete slog. Horrible, slow moving, weird movie. If you liked Only God Forgives, you'll really like this. If you liked Neon Demon, you'll hate this. I thought Neon Demon he was kind of getting back to his roots and the type of movies he'd made in the past. You know, if you've seen Bleeder or Pusher, you know, those were high energy films. I was hoping this one would have that too, but no, it's just Miles Teller being all angsty, and it's just very arty. I didn't really get into it. Most people, this is an interesting thing. I saw it at the Lumiere Theater, which is like this 5,000 occupancy theater. It's one of the largest theaters in the country. And anytime you stand up, the chairs make this loud flap noise, so you can hear when people are actually standing up and leaving the auditorium. It was a sold out show, and when the lights came up, half the audience had left. It was very maligned, and people really, really hated it. So thumbs down on that one. A film I did see, this was part of the Un Certain Regard. It was called Bacurau. And this is a Brazilian film. It's a Brazilian thriller. I won't go into too much details of the story because I don't really know what the story is necessarily, other than people in a city in Brazil are kind of disappearing and people are trying to figure it out. It is pretty great. It is a slow burn, steady, slow moving movie. For the first half, it's about 2 hours long. So for first hour, it's slow, but you know you're building to something. The last hour of the film they just drop one of the most intense, just hyper violence scene. It just goes on and on. It's hyper violence for the last hour, and you are on the edge of your seat, and it is astonishing. And more than made up for the slog at the beginning of the movie. So it's, and I don't even want to call it a slog. It was just a slow burn, which I really liked, but it was just leading to this inevitable dread of all this hyper violence that happened at the end. So thumbs up on that one. The last thing I saw was last night, and I saw a documentary called Making Waves, The Art of Cinematic Sound Design. Really, really awesome documentary. I saw this because I don't think I'll ever get a chance to see it again. It's one of those really awesome movies. It might pop up on Netflix in the next 2 years or so, but you're never really going to see or hear of it. It's probably just going to just sort of ghost its way onto Amazon Prime or Netflix, but you really need to look out for it. Making Waves. It was directed by a professor at USC. Her name is Midge Conton. And she did a really great job in really bringing together what it is to create a soundscape on movies. And she interviewed pretty much all the directors that we align with great sound design. So George Lucas was interviewed talking about the sound in Star Wars, Ang Lee, David Lynch, Christopher Nolan, and then she interviewed basically the two most well-known guys to ever, exist in the realm of sound design. That's Walter Murch and Ben Burt. And they were really forthcoming in sound design and how they did it and what they did it and how they got started. And they had great examples where they would show snippets of film that just showed like rough cut. So we saw the rough cut of Ordinary People, a scene or two of just the unfinished sound, and then they juxtaposed that with the finished sound, and it was just it's great. It's just an amazing movie, and pretty much everybody in the audience there were film students, film professors. There were no critics or anything. It was a very small, intimate little setting, and the director was in attendance, and she did a Q&A, and it was really great. And so it was a great just movie going experience. So that's all that kind of covers it. Dead Don't Die, Les Miserables, Rocket Man, Too Old to Die Young, Bacurau, and Making Waves. Tonight I'm going to see the remastered 4K version of The Shining, which is going to be on an IMAX screen on a 4K projector. So I'm assuming this is going to be this awesome thing. And tomorrow I'm also seeing a remastered cut of Milos Forman's film Loves of a Blonde, which is always one of my favorite films of that new wave era, and it's also a 4K restoration. So, but again, I'll check in with you guys next week, next Friday. I'll hit you up again and tell you kind of all the stuff that's been going on. In addition to that, I also saw, he's about probably 6 feet away from me. I saw Alfonso Cuarón. I saw Miles Teller. He walked past me in a corridor. Shockingly, the dude's like 6'1". Never would have guessed it from Whiplash. He looked like a 5'7" wee little boy, but he is a tall, dashing man. And I also met John Carpenter, which was pretty cool. And we talked about video games and he absolutely loves Fortnite. Weird. So, interesting. So, just let me guys know if there's any movies, that you maybe want me to see for you guys. I'm trying to try my best to get into the Tarantino film, but it's, of course, all the buzz. That movie premieres next Tuesday. So in a couple of days, the whole cast and Tarantino himself, will be in town. So I'll check in with you and see what I got. Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I know I did. I found it very interesting. I did not know there was that much stuff going on at Cannes.
Yeah, I think that the part I found the most interesting was actually all the stuff that's going on and how Cannes works, and the different festivals that are happening at the one festival. So that was something I didn't know.
Yeah, agreed. So out of all the movies that he talked about, all the directors he talked about, what intrigues you guys the most, disappoints you the most, excites you the most, etc.?
I find the Elton John review, because I'm not expecting much from that movie.
Rocket Man, yeah.
Rocket Man, yeah. So I found that surprising. And so I'm a little bit more interested than I was before.
Yeah, to hear him acknowledge that he didn't like Bohemian Rhapsody at all, but still managed to like Rocket Man more, gives me hope, because I really did not think Rocket Man looked very good based on the trailers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think automatically I have to be intrigued by Les Miserables, the film that he talked about that has nothing to do with the musical.
Oh, yeah.
He said that's the best thing he's seen. And I believe he said he wants it to win the Palme d'Or.
Yeah.
And, just hearing that kind of review automatically makes me excited to see something. So I don't know. And it sounded good based on what he said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know much about it at this point, but that review alone is enough for me.
Yeah. And I don't want to say that I was surprised by his review of the Jim Jarmusch movie. What is the name of it?
The Dead Don't Die.
Yes, The Dead Don't Die, because based on the trailer, it looked exactly like what he described it as.
Right.
But I had hoped that it would be more.
When he described it, I thought to myself, that sounds exactly like a Jim Jarmusch movie.
Right.
Which it may not be great, but I feel like I would have a great time with it.
Sure.
Which maybe I'm alone on the Jim Jarmusch love. Yeah.
I've never been one to click with Jim Jarmusch's movies. I don't dislike any of them, but of the ones I've seen, I've never connected with them on the level that I felt like I should.
Yeah, I think I maybe enjoyed Jim Jarmusch just a bit more.
Yeah?
But, yeah.
I think Broken Flowers is my favorite.
Mm-hmm. I like, was it Coffees and Cigarettes? This was a short film. What was the one?
Yeah. That was pretty
It was
good.
the one with it's like a 13 little vignette scenes that don't have much to do with each other.
Iggy Pop and
Bill Murray's in that one too.
Yeah, Bill Murray.
Kate Blanchett.
Jack White.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's a lot of fun. Other ones of his have been pretty hit or miss. I agree with Peyton. He talked about Limits of Control, which I watched and extremely did not like.
Yeah, I remember when you watched that. And your review stopped me from watching it.
Yeah, I felt like I just didn't get it. Like I could not have been more disconnected from that. But to hear that this is, did he say that this was better than Limits of Control? He said it's not as bad as Limits of Control.
Yeah, but he didn't like it.
Yeah. So at least it's better than that.
Yeah, he said it was a slog pretty much the whole time. So that is kind of a bummer, especially since it's an hour and a half-ish zombie movie. I can't imagine it being that boring. But then again, Jim Jarmusch, you never know what that guy's going to be interested in doing.
Yeah. And I do hope that one day we get to see the sound doc, because the thing that he was talking about sounded really interesting, like where they're talking about how the process of like making the sound mix and soundscapes for different films. Yeah, that sounds fascinating. I hope that doesn't do what he says and becomes hard to find.
I know. I'm jealous, Peyton.
Yeah,
very jealous.
Yeah, I
have fun.
Been checking my mail, and I never got an invite. So, I mean, I'm sure it was just late, right?
Yeah, I'm sure he probably just mixed up the numbers on your address, and just flipped it around.
Yeah,
one of your neighbors probably has a really nice trip to Ken.
It's probably hanging out with Peyton right now. One of my neighbors.
Yeah, well, hopefully next week he gets to see some cool stuff too, and I actually really look forward to hearing what he has.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really well done. Good job, Peyton.
Yeah. Thanks for providing us that update. We appreciate it, and we hope you have a good time. Enjoy the rest of your trip. I wonder if he got a chance to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I think I saw a post from him that he did not, because it was crazy packed, and then also he's like, there's pandemonium in the streets. I bet
that one's like the hardest thing to get into on the whole festival, basically.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Terrence Malick's new movie.
Yeah. Loser.
Although I'm sure that was packed as well.
Yeah, no, I would kill to see Terrence Malick's new movie premiere at Cannes right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Is that it for this episode?
That does it for me.
It does it for me.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. And then thank you, Jake Wagner Russell, for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Stay tuned to this channel. Our next episode will likely be a casually Criterion on Stalker. And then next week we have a review of what does come out next week?
It's Brightburn, Aladdin, or Booksmart, depending on what's closest to you.
I kind of want to see all of those movies. I don't even know what.
Yeah, my preference is Booksmart, if that comes to you. I saw the Brightburn trailer in front of John Wick 3, and to me it looked really bad.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean I don't want to see it.
Yeah.
That's what it means for me, but that's kind of bottom of my list, basically.
Nope. I'm going to insist on one of those two now.
We're watching Brightburn it is.
Yep, Brightburn it is. Okay. Just kidding. We'll see what comes. But anyway, if any of those sound interesting to you, or if you have any opinions on any of those, send us a message and we will try to make that happen for you.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
See you later.